I have never run a business before where I get these unsolicited thank you notes from perfect strangers who say, you saved my marriage, or you changed the trajectory of my family. Because back to what I said in the beginning, a job, your vocation is such an important part of who you are. And when you are swimming in the waters of woke culture for 8 to 10 hours a day, it will have a huge impact on your worldview, on your outlook on life. And if you can be at a company that's free, that actually believes in freedom, you're going to be surprised what an impact it has. So Redballoon.work, we are a job board for those who care about freedom. We also do some other interesting things for small businesses, because for a small business, hiring is terrifying today. Because if you ask the wrong questions in an interview, you're going to get yourself a lawsuit. But if you don't ask those questions, you're going to get a bad culture fit, and then you're going to get a lawsuit. So what we started doing, we actually started this with Louder with Crowder, but we actually do it with a lot of businesses now, is we'll actually take on that hiring process for a business. We'll help write a job posting. We'll post on Redballoon and other places. We'll do direct sourcing through resume databases to make sure we're getting lots of candidates. And then we'll turn around and actually interview people and do a first cultural interview to make sure that we are driving value for that business and bringing them someone who's going to build their culture, not destroy their culture. So that's what Redballoon.work is. So we are a job board plus.
Howdy, everyone, and welcome back to Moment of Truth, the podcast of American Moment. My name is Saurabh Sharma. I'm the president of American Moment, and I'm joined by
Nick Solheim, the COO of American Moment.
And this week, we have yet another fantastic episode for you guys today. Something a little bit off the beaten track this week. We'll get to what that is in a moment, but as always, be sure to go to AmericanMoment.org. There you can find the backlog of this show and everything we have cooking here at American Moment. Upcoming programs, the backlog of this show, AmCanon, which is our collation of books, essays, podcasts, YouTube videos, and more, as well as just general news on what's going on. We're a busy, thriving, and wildly successful organization that you have to learn more about. So go to AmericanMoment.org. This week we had on someone from the business world, someone who's doing a lot of interesting stuff in politics, but with a very interesting perspective on a lot of the concepts that we talk about here at American Moment. This week we had on Andrew Crapuchettes. I think I'm getting that right. He is not offended like I am when people pronounce his name wrong. He was joking about in France, his name sounds really cool, and here it gets a lot of question marks, and I definitely understand that. Andrew is a pioneer in the labor market, data and analytics industry, and the visionary behind Redballoon. He began his career as a young Silicon Valley entrepreneur, building business process automation and selling 3D modeling software. In 2001, he became a founding member and later CEO of Emsi, now Lightcast, which he transformed from a little-known consulting company of 3 employees to an international economic data firm with over 250 employees worldwide. He built that company from scratch, and then that company pushed him out. And we talk about that story and everything going on in the parallel economy, what it means to be a business leader today, how to hire, how to fire, how to build a movement for Red America. I just thought it was a fascinating discussion. Nick, what did you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, I first met Andrew out in Moscow, I think it was like back in May. And it was super evident to me then that he was a guy who's already been to a lot of places and is going a lot of places, being in his office and meeting a lot of the people that work for him and with him, building a lot of great things. This is the way of the future for the conservative ecosystem. I mean, it was a fascinating conversation. We totally believe in Andrew and everything him and his team is working on, and we look forward to seeing much of their success.
And look, the red economy is only going to work if employees are as productive as humanly possible, which is why we're such big fans of Magic Mind. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see these little green shots that you keep in your fridge and drink with your morning coffee. They help extend that caffeine productivity boost that you get in the morning. And frankly, they work even without the caffeine. I've been taking Magic Mind every morning for the past couple of months, and it's honestly been such a help in making sure that it can have those long productivity stretches going on into the evening without getting all jittery and crazy from caffeine. Nick used to drink like a gallon of coffee a day and was a crazy person. But with Magic Mind, we've been vastly more productive. It's a lot of fantastic natural ingredients, including matcha, adaptogens, nootropics. It boosts your immunity with vitamin C, D, and echinacea. It's good stuff in there. You drink it with your morning coffee. It tastes good, it's subtly sweet, and it really helps make sure that you get that big productivity boost you need in order to be successful. So we can't recommend it enough. And if you'd like to try it out, you can go to magicmind.com and use our promo code TRUTH20, or you can go to magicmind.com/quiteunusual20. There you can find all the products they sell. You can get it a one-time purchase, you can get on a subscription, but I highly recommend trying it out. DC is a town that's absolutely crazy all the time, and if you want to make sure that you have the stamina to get through the day and be the most productive person you can to save America, be sure to try out Magic Mind. Once again, the promo code is TRUTH20. We'll go now to Andrew, CEO of Red Balloon, and one of the great pioneers behind the parallel economy. Andrew, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
We always like to hear about how our guests got to where they are today. You have a very interesting story, one that's a little bit different than most of the guests on this show, a world that involves business and the whole other side of the country. Tell us that story. How did you become the person you are today, involved in what you are today?
Okay. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. My dad actually helped install the first computers at Stanford University when he was there as a PhD student. And so I was always around computers. And then there was some .coms that thought that I had skills at 16. So I started working. I didn't actually even finish high school, really. I describe my wife and I as she's Dr. Crapuchettes and I'm sub-GED Crapuchettes. But I paid for her degrees, so I feel like I get some credit for all of her fancy degrees. So grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. Got to do a .com there with some other people. We raised $32 million of VC money.
$32 million in the late 90s, a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot of money. And
that's like nothing today.
Yeah, it's a rounding. It's what the coffee cost this morning with the inflation. So it was really fascinating, though, because as a young man, I ended up doing 7 different jobs for them over a 7-year period. I turned 21 on an expense account because I was traveling to, by the time I turned 21, I was in charge of sales engineers for the West Coast and Asia for this company. And so I spent a lot of time in Tokyo, at karaoke bars, playing golf, having a really good time. And it's funny when you do all those things and you don't have the discipline of fiscal responsibility, that $32 million goes pretty quick. But it also teaches you a lot about this whole VC world where it's this weird bending of reality, because most businesses, if you started a welding shop, you would try and be profitable because that's how you pay your bills. But when you have this whole .com world, which I'll get into because I've then started a bunch of other businesses, you have this push to grow regardless of profit, which I don't think is actually how the world was designed by God. So anyway, we went through that. Lo and behold, when you have a really good time, you run out of money eventually. And we did. So the company we went from 250 to 18 employees one day. And I was not one of those employees. And they basically left a skeleton crew around to clean up the mess. About a year before that happened, I got tired of traffic and liberals. So I moved to Idaho. And as you know, the Bay Area has lots of traffic and liberals. So living up there was amazing because I moved up there for a year. So I was an early adopter of getting out of California and working from home. So they allowed me to continue to work for a year up in Idaho. When the business went out, when it went down to those 18 employees and I wasn't one of them, I looked around and saw that there weren't a lot of good jobs in Moscow. Moscow, Idaho is where I live now. And it's a college town and you either worked at the university or the hospital or Walmart. There really weren't a lot of options. And so I thought, well, if God's given me skills, I should use those to bless other people, because a job is just a really important part of who a person is, right? If you meet someone new, you ask them, what do you do? And you're asking what their job is, but that question betrays the job's not just a 9-to-5 hobby, it's your vocation. It's a defining feature of who you are. And so if we want Christians to thrive and be prosperous, they need to have good jobs. And so that really was the goal and the motivation for me. So I was able to found a 3D printing business that we ended up selling off to Stryker. I started a student information system business with a couple other guys that is now called Populi. Ended up doing a management buyout to them, so they bought all of the ownership because I wanted them to be able to build their own wealth. And then I started a company called Economic Modeling Specialists International with 2 economists. So I never had more than 30% ownership, so I never had a controlling interest. But the 3 of us started this business with a thesis around, can we create labor market data that gives people decision-ready information at the point of decision for some of the biggest decisions in their life? And you think about, like, if you on your phone, you can decide where you're going to go on a vacation or get a mortgage for your house or dinner tonight, or any of this information is on your phone. But what's not on your phone is, what college degree should I get that will fit with who I am and will drive the highest prosperity in my vocation, right? Or what skill could I achieve right now that would give me the biggest raise in my job? Like, there's none of this information available to most individuals. And so we went on this kind of journey to develop labor market data. But because I'm kind of a strange person, our goal was not a business goal initially, because back to, I wanted prosperity in Moscow. I wanted great jobs. And so the first business goal for this company, Economic Modeling Specialists International, Emsi, was 50 employees earning over $50,000 a year in Moscow, Idaho. So the goal was all around driving
Were your
great
co-founders
jobs.
in Moscow as well?
Yes,
Okay.
they were. Yep. Both of them were professors from the university. So Moscow's where the University of Idaho is. So it's a sleepy little college town.
Yeah.
And so 50 at 50 was our goal, because we thought, if we can do that, if we have a $2.5 million payroll, we'll actually start to move the needle. And I know $50,000 doesn't sound like a lot in Washington, D.C., but 20 years ago in Moscow, Idaho, that was pretty good money. And so that was our initial goal, is 50 at 50. If we can do that, it will actually move the needle in this little town. And by the grace of God, we went way, way past that. But that was the initial goal of the business. And the goal was bring labor market data to people so that they can make good decisions. We ended up bringing labor market data for community colleges primarily. And then we started going into chambers of commerce, economic development. So we started helping a lot of organizations understand what the makeup of their economy is. Because you think about, if you are a community college and you decide you want to do a registered nursing program, that is a multi-million-dollar decision, because you've got to get faculty, you've got to get a location, you've got to get equipment, you've got to get curriculum, you need to market the program, you need to get students in, and then you need to get them all the way through into the workforce. And if you do all that and there's no job for them at the end, you've done everybody a massive disservice, right? So, but if you can look at good labor market data that is not designed for economists, but is designed for people who are trying to make those decisions, then you can make better decisions. So we worked with most of the community colleges in the country, a lot of universities, and then we ended up working with a lot of large corporations. So Amazon, Facebook, all the usual suspects. And basically any company with over 5,000 employees was starting to do strategic workforce planning and thinking about their workforce. And the way I explained this best is, I was talking to a Fortune 500 CEO, and I said, what do you care the most about your business? He's like, our people are our most important asset. I'm like, well, that makes sense. All of us say that. Okay, so you have a 5-year financial plan? He's like, well, of course we do. It's we're a publicly traded company. I said, do you have a 5-year people plan? A plan to be able to have the talent in your workforce within your 4 walls so that your businesses can succeed? He's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so that's really what we were striving to do. We were helping with strategic workforce planning for a lot of these companies. So anyway, I continued to build the business. We built it to about $50 million, ended up selling it a whole bunch of times. The first time I sold it, remember, it's me and those 2 economists. I knew as much about business as anybody in the business. And I knew that I needed to grow and expand my horizons to be a better business person. And so I went and found a private equity firm in Palo Alto, and they bought a majority stake in the business, bought out most of the owners, gave me some more ownership, allowed me to grow the business. And that was a 2.5-year process that was really, really helpful. It was also kind of fun to, pay off your house and things like that.
Totally.
That was cool. But then after 2.5 years, I kind of like, okay, we've kind of maxed out what we've learned from them, and we're going to move to the next. And so then we sold it to Career Builder. large job board, which is going to full circle back to what I'm doing today. Career Builder bought it, and that was a great way for us to enter into that corporate space because they already have a massive sales team that are selling to those people. Career Builder was kind of in a tough spot because they were not executing well. And so when they bought us, and this unfortunately what happens a lot is businesses buy other small businesses when they're not innovating themselves anymore. They're using that as a proxy for just because they have a bunch of cash, right? So Career Builder was kind of on the decline. They were bought by Apollo, which is big bad private equity out of New York. And I met with those people and they realized, hey, we have a business within Career Builder that's smaller, but is growing 40% a year with a 40% margin. And that is a very high, and it's all SaaS, right? That's a very high value business. And so they sold this little piece of Career Builder for almost a third of what they paid for all of Career Builder. So they did pretty well in that transaction. So we ended up going over to Strata, which was a national nonprofit, which was phenomenal. They were great to work with until BLM and George Floyd and COVID came around. And then the social pressure on them as a national nonprofit was immense. And they wanted me to start making statements about George Floyd or BLM or COVID. They wanted me to have all the employees get masked or vaccinated. I'm like, I'm just a hard no on all of these things because in what world do you, as the CEO of a data company, decide you're going to ostracize some of your customers by making this big political statement one way or the other? And they could not see that because the pressure from the left was so strong.
And your workforce was still largely based out of Moscow.
It was largely based out of Moscow and largely Christian. And I knew that they would have a smoking crater on their hands if I did what they said.
Where was the Strata headquarters?
They were in Indianapolis,
okay,
but a lot of tight ties to DC.
Yeah, so
right,
not a very different cultural workforce.
Very, very different, right? And so now we're in this moment, and I had fights with their legal department. Then they started looking into the culture that I was building. And look, I was striving to have a distinctly Christian culture, even if there were not Christians as the owners of the organization. And so we had kind of three guiding principles for our business. First, we bless the customer, and that means we want them to be better off even if they don't buy anything. We want them to be better at doing their job. We want them to be able to use data to make better decisions in their organizations, even if they don't pay us money. And when you do that, it's amazing. Customers love you. And so bless the customer, then bless the employee. I wanted every employee to be a better person because they worked for me. Not just a better employee, but a better person, better father, husband, wife, mother, etc. And when you do that, it's amazing because I would tell employees, look, you're probably not going to retire here at this company. And so I want you to be a better employee for your next employer. And when you say stuff like that, it's funny how nobody leaves, right? Everyone struggles with retention, but when you hold on tight to all your employees and you're desperate to not lose anybody, you generally lose everybody.
Yeah.
But when you're saying, look, I want you to be better people so that you can have a better job somewhere else, so that you can be a better member of society, it's funny, our turnover was shockingly low, right? So bless the customer, bless the employees, and then bless the shareholder, because we are people under authority. We should understand that shareholders should be part of this. But if shareholders understand that customers come first, then employees, the shareholders are going to do very well. And they did do very well as part of this organization. So we were striving for that. And every new employee that came into the business, I would ask them, I would say, look, you can come from whatever faith tradition you want, but I'm an unapologetic conservative CEO who is a Christian, and I'm going to run the business like that. If that's a problem for you, probably this isn't the right place for you. And I only had 3 employees over 15 years, or potential employees, say, that just makes me uncomfortable. Like, great. That just saved us both a lot of time. And actually, my lawyer's like, for you to say that, it's kind of like the equivalent of saying the contents of this cup might be hot. And then if someone burns themselves, it's like, well, I told you I was a Christian CEO. I'm going to pray at dinners. I'm going to, and I said, the ramifications of that are we're not going to have politics in the office. So if someone comes into my office and says, hey, you as the CEO are doing a terrible job, then they might get a raise because I want to listen to that input. But if they come into my office and say, Nick is doing a terrible job and they haven't talked to Nick first, they might get fired on the spot because I did not want a culture where you could talk behind each other's back. We had a kegerator in the office, but I said, look, the beer is for us to have fun and live in the joy of life, but not to get drunk. And if you get drunk at work, I'm going to fire you for that too. So there were ramifications of this Christian culture in the business. And I had a lot of people who did not have any sort of Christian background. Like, this is the safest, healthiest, happiest business I've ever been in. The board did not agree with that. So they actually got a Boston law firm to do a dossier on the culture that I was building, and that was not a happy thing. So they ended up selling it, I think, despite me, to KKR's ESG fund. So, and if you know anything, KKR, barbarians in the gate, the whole situation, right? And you can guess that KKR's ESG fund was not a fan of my me.
What was the even vaguely colorable reason to sell it to the ESG fund to begin with? Why was the ESG fund interested?
Because it's people. So it was, environmental, social. Yeah. It's a social aspect, right? Oh, we're helping people get better jobs. Yeah. Yada, yada, yada. Well, so, yeah. So.
Well, it's interesting too, like having been to your office in Moscow, like you can see the building from those windows in your office. Like it's still there. So tell us more about that, transition into starting Red Balloon and all of that.
Yeah. So it's all right. I've been monologuing on all this stuff. So
it's all great.
It interesting because this was, I'll be honest, very, very painful, right? I built this business over 20 years and I'd done some of these other businesses. I was on the NSA board for a bit. I'd helped Logos. I'm on the ACCS, Association of Classical Christian Schools National Board. So I had other interests, but Emsi really was my main thing. And I was trying to figure out, how do we build a distinctly Christian culture that drives prosperity for Moscow? And so when you get fired, and it wasn't firing, when you're a CEO, they say, we would like you to be an advisor to the board. So you get this promotion, meaning we don't want you around anymore. So when that happened, it was really hard because for 20 years, I was the guy who was running this business. We just built a new 70,000 square foot headquarters in Moscow. We were the dominant employer. I had a...
you guys were the biggest private sector employer in the city, probably?
For sure. Yeah. For sure. I had a Christmas contest where we gave away like $15,000 a year in Christmas decoration prizes. Like, I was like, I'm going to lean into, because who doesn't like Christmas? And if Christ came and changed the world, we should celebrate it like we mean it. So anyway, so I get kicked out effectively, which is interesting because they long story boring, KKR had bought another business that was our top competitor, and we were slowly putting them out of business. And so KKR was about to take a 9-figure loss on that business. So they could outbid everybody else for the business by 9 figures and still come out ahead because they would just combine the businesses. So they took the CEO of that failing business and put him over the whole thing. Which I knew would not last, because even if you have the right social media profile, you still have to be good at your job, it turns out. And so that only lasted for 4 or 5 months, and then they got rid of him, and now they have another CEO in there. But it was a hard transition because a lot of my identity was tied up in, this is my job, this is what I'm doing, and I needed to transition, as a Christian, to know my identity's in Christ, and I need to not be distracted by this desire for, I was the ring giver. I was the one who gave the great jobs, who made a ton of money. And now I was the guy who was, I moved to a small office in one of my buildings, and it was like, and here I am. But that's okay. And God used that. My wife actually wrote an article in the Federalist, and this is a transition to Red Balloon, saying my husband wasn't fired, he was redeployed. And if God redeploys you to do something else, you can't question that, right? As a soldier. So, and that's kind of ties me back to the Red Balloon story.
I really do want to get into the Red Balloon stuff, but over the course of you telling that narrative, I sort of realized, and you would kind of slyly mention it each time, you've seen almost every element of how modern business life works, ranging from venture capital to mergers and acquisitions to scaling from a small to a medium to, 280 is large is a strong word, but in the grand scheme of things, you've seen private equity, you've seen ESG up close. I just want to run through a couple of those different elements because I think it's interesting. Going back to the beginning, I mean, do you think that the VC model of funding, I guess specifically software companies, results in perverse incentives? I mean, how do you think that system should work? Or do you think that it should be a smaller piece of the pie than it currently is?
Yeah, I do think it should be a smaller piece of the pie. There are some businesses that I don't know if there's a way to scale them without massive injection of capital, right? And pick on like a two-sided marketplace, like my friends over at Public Square. So they're trying to build a marketplace with consumers and businesses, and they've got to find each other. Well, the problem is if you're Public Square and you are carefully trying to grow, then and not burning through a lot of capital. Well, let's say you only have one coffee shop in all of DC in your app. Well, the problem is if a consumer comes, looks, and like, oh, yep, I don't see anything here, they probably will just get rid of the app and not use it again, right? And that's it's a problem we struggle with Redballoon a little bit. And you look at organizations like Uber or others where basically it's a scale business, and you either have scale or you have nothing. So I think those type of businesses, it's inevitable that you have to have some significant injection of capital to be able to get over the hump. You look at Yelp. Yelp took $400 million to be able to get to profitable. ZipRecruiter took $700 million of injected capital of investment to get to profitable. So some of these two-sided businesses need that. Or you look at an Indeed.com, who is a big woke job board. They only took $5 million of capital 20 years ago, which is, the equivalent of call it $20 million of capital today. And comparatively, but they took 20 years, they almost took 10 years to really get to the point where they were to scale, and they really struggled for a long time. So I'd say some businesses, that's the case. There's other businesses where it's actually just the lazy man's way of getting yourself a big salary, because it is way easier to raise capital than customers. Believe it or not, like I could go and pitch a VC, especially with my background at this point, and I could get almost anything funded. That doesn't mean I'm going to be able to find product market fit and actually bless customers and actually build a revenue positive business. Mm-hmm. So I think it has become a crutch for a lot of people to not deal with the market tension of I need to have a great product that is valuable for our customers enough that it pays all my bills. Right. And, you even look at DoorDash today. DoorDash is still losing massive amounts of money. Yeah. And they've got to figure out how to solve that, because at some point it used to be you would invest in a business for the return, not just for the hope of growth. Right. And I think that's the kind of perverse incentive in the market right now.
Yeah, that's particularly interesting. I guess in the world of enterprise SaaS specifically, there's an added weird element, which is, you look at who the day one through maybe even day 1,000 customers are for a lot of enterprise SaaS companies. It's other companies in the portfolio of the venture capitalists who funded the enterprise SaaS company.
For sure.
Like there's a lot of funny business that goes on in that world. In any one-sided transaction like that, it does seem like the discipline of finding product market fit is just a lot less prevalent.
Well, I'll give you an example. So Emsi, the company I built, we never took growth capital. Wow. So we built the whole thing with customer revenue. And we ended up with some one-time products because that gets you paid a lot faster than software products. Mm-hmm. And so we did these economic impact studies where we would do the work and then we get paid for the work. And that helped fuel the development of the software and then the renewable engine that really propelled the business. But it is possible to build a business without just venture capital and the weird market distortion that happens when all of a sudden you have 32 million of venture capital money and you're playing golf for no reason with customers in Tokyo.
Well, it's also a lot harder, I think, to base that company if it was venture capital funded out of Moscow, Idaho.
For sure.
Because venture capitalists are not looking... They're looking to get a return on their portfolio in 7 years. They're not interested in you creating prosperity in a small town in Idaho.
Correct.
So tell us more about Redballoon.
Okay.
All these listeners have heard us mention it, and they're probably wondering what the heck we're talking about.
It's a cliffhanger. So Redballoon. So about 4 months after I left, I was going to take a year off. I'm doing a large housing development in Moscow. I own a number of commercial buildings in Moscow. And I was just going to take a year off, play a little golf, do a little real estate, and then figure out what my next chapter was. And a friend was like, hey, what happened to you where you basically had to decide between your job and your values? I bet that's going to happen to a lot of other Americans with this wokeness in the workplace. You should make a job board with a thesis around freedom so that if those people have to make that decision, they at least know where to go, right? Because what's interesting is for a conservative, your job is a very important lever to maybe make you compromise. Like if we get canceled off of Facebook, I'm going to shrug it off like, okay, like worse things have happened. If you get canceled from your ability to feed your kids and pay your mortgage, you're going to be much more tempted to compromise something you hold dearly. And so we wanted to have a spot so when someone is presented with that alternative, they know, well, if I stick with my values and I lose my job, I can find another job. So Redballoon.work, because .com sounded too much like communist to me. And so it's a .work. So Redballoon.work is now the nation's leading job board for those who want freedom and don't want wokeness in the workplace. Really cool. I started it really on a whim. My brother and I knocked it out in a weekend because I have a technology background and he does. And we're like, ta-da, job board, we're good to go. And I made some videos so that people would know, and then I was going to be done. And we started getting businesses and job seekers were like, that's great, but this isn't really what I'm doing right now. And then the vaccine mandate came along. And Joe Biden.
Oh, so you were building this in 2021?
I was.
Wow.
And I was building it just months before the vaccine mandate came around. And then that comes around and I get a call from Fox and Friends. And they say, hey, we heard that you have the nation's leading job board for those who don't have a vaccine mandate. And I'm like, sure. Yeah, that sounds about right. So I get on Fox and Friends and you do that. And then all of a sudden you have hundreds of employers joining and thousands of job seekers. And all of a sudden you have this marketplace. As part of that, and it's funny because I would say controversial things like, I think you should talk to your doctor, not your HR department, about what you put in your body. People would be like, what is this? So I've done like 400 media interviews in the last 18 months because that's great marketing. And I say crazy things like that. So Redballoon.work, we now have over 3,000 businesses who have signed a pledge that they think the Constitution still matters, and they are promising to respect the freedom of their current and future employees up to and including medical privacy. And then we have over 1 million job seekers have been on the site. And when they sign up, they sign a pledge that says, I will show up to work, I will do my job, and I won't be a whiner, basically. And so when you all of a sudden have a marketplace like that, it's amazing. I have never run a business before where I get these unsolicited thank you notes from perfect strangers who say, you saved my marriage, or you changed the trajectory of my family. Because back to what I said in the beginning, a job, your vocation is such an important part of who you are. And when you are swimming in the waters of woke culture for 8 to 10 hours a day, it will have a huge impact on your worldview, on your outlook on life. And if you can be at a company that's free, that actually believes in freedom, you're going to be surprised what an impact it has. So Redballoon.work, we are a job board for those who care about freedom. We also do some other interesting things for small businesses, because for a small business, hiring is terrifying today. Because if you ask the wrong questions in an interview, you're going to get yourself a lawsuit. But if you don't ask those questions, you're going to get a bad culture fit, and then you're going to get a lawsuit. And so for a small business, I was talking to a small Christian radio station in Texas. He's like, I need an executive assistant. I literally don't even know where to start, because if I get somebody in here who's a woke tard, it's going to destroy my business. I know it will. And if I fire them, they're going to sue me, and then the business is gone, right? They're terrified. So what we started doing, we actually started this with Louder with Crowder, but we actually do it with a lot of businesses now, is we'll actually take on that hiring process for a business. We'll help write a job posting. We'll post on Redballoon and other places. We'll do direct sourcing through resume databases to make sure we're getting lots of candidates. And then we'll turn around and actually interview people and do a first cultural interview to make sure that we are driving value for that business and bringing them someone who's going to build their culture, not destroy their culture. So that's what Redballoon.work is. So we are a job board plus, if that makes sense.
Are you worried that as you attain more success, that there will start to be, in a completely dishonest way, sort of legal scrutiny on that process? What are the risks there associated with, you know, everything from Civil Rights Act to other legal barriers to doing that kind of extreme cultural fit? assessment on people?
So we have a labor lawyer, and Laura the labor lawyer, which is fun to say. Laura the labor lawyer, she went to Harvard Law School. She was a labor lawyer in California, the People's Republic of California, for 20 years. And so she has a deep understanding of EEOC and all of the things connected with that. And so we are constantly doing training for our staff because there will be legal scrutiny. Someone will go after us. In fact, it's happened multiple times when we got on interviews with people who had applied for jobs and realized they were actually reporters trying to do a hit piece on what we were doing. That's happened a number of times. And our team knows exactly what to do. And like, okay, so are you applying for the job? Are you willing to relocate? No. Okay. It's probably just not a good fit. There's no reason for us to engage in questions about Red Balloon. So that's absolutely going to happen and it will continue to happen. But there are a lot of legal protections in the hiring process, and a lot of conservatives don't take advantage of those in the way that liberals do. You can describe your business all you want, right? You could say, look, we believe in bless the customer. What does that mean to you? Right. And when you asked a question like that, an open-ended, evidence-based question, give us an example of where you blessed customers and really understood that. Well, it's hard to answer that if you actually don't have a deep understanding and a good culture fit. Right. So that's what we do right now. And we interview literally hundreds of people every month for our customers. And it has just been a huge blessing for them. So far, so good. When I call you from prison, I'll let you know.
Is there like an anti-Red Balloon? Like, you must be vaccinated to, yeah. I guess it's Indeed, probably.
Indeed. So Answers in Genesis signed up last week. On Red Balloon, and we got them a ton of candidates. And the reason they signed up is because Indeed kicked them off. Indeed said, you're a known terrorist organization, Answers in Genesis and all that. Ken Ham actually wrote them a letter saying, hey, we're a religious organization. It's legitimate what we're doing. And Indeed said, nothing doing. You're not allowed on here. We had a small construction company that described themselves as God-fearing and freedom-loving, and Indeed kicked them off forever, for life, because that was a violation of their community standards. We were doing some work for the DeSantis campaign, and Indeed would not allow those job postings on there, regardless of what you think of that whole situation. Indeed was definitely using their worldview to push people off their platform, right? Mm-hmm. And so the reality is that if you go to Indeed, you can find out how to interview a non-binary person in a way that's not offensive. So yes, I would say Indeed is the alternative if you're looking for that.
One of the things that I think is so compelling about you specifically running this organization is, having been in DC for about 3 years now, and specifically in a period of great sort of speciation and churn with new ideas, political people coming up with ideas in the business world is a thing that happens all the time. And
I'm sure.
I remember there was this guy who snuck into an event he was not supposed to be at, who was claiming he was going to create anti-woke server infrastructure. And he's a lifelong political consultant, doesn't know anything about technology, and was stuffing his business card in everyone's hand, just grifting off of it. The piece of it that I think is so compelling in your case is that, a political person, a pundit, a commentator could easily come in and say, we're going to create the anti-woke job board. And they may have. I don't know how many organizations like yours exist. But you've actually hired and fired and built a company that had no political valence other than the culture that you were trying to set internally. With that background, what are sort of non-obvious parts of doing what you do that you guys are specifically suited to do better than anyone else?
Yeah. Business execution is really hard, and doing business execution while not just blowing through lots and lots of money is even harder. Right. And I would love to avoid any future exits. And I know that every entrepreneur out there, man, I'm going to build this business, build it to exit and make a big check. And there's a reason private equity buys businesses, because they're not idiots. They're buying it because they think they can make more money owning it than not. Right. And so they're willing to put in crazy amounts of money. And why would we want to exit? Why would we want to build? Why would we as conservatives and Christians want to use our creativity, our God-given creativity, to build a business to hand off to someone else? Right. And so I would like to build a business that I don't have to exit. Well, doing that requires me to be much more diligent on building infrastructure that didn't cost millions and millions of dollars. I obviously need to be on non-woke IT infrastructure, which we are, because we are very prone to people would want to cancel us if given the opportunity. But we also need to put ourselves in the shoes of customers, and that's hard to do if you're in the echo chamber of DC.
Yeah.
Right. You're not down with people. And so, this kind of premium product where we go through and we actually do the hiring and we help with that hiring for customers. Well, that came from me hiring a lot of recruiters over the years and realizing there's this weird perverse incentive where there's some good recruiters, but there's a lot of charlatans in that space where they're charging 20 to 30% of the first year salary of the person they hire. So they hire you a $200,000 COO or a $300,000 COO, and they get 20% on that. Well, that's a really big check that a small business, in fact, Moms for America, her board, Kimberly's board, basically said, you need to plan on spending $25,000 per hire and just go out and get yourself a recruiter. And so she posted her jobs on Red Balloon, and she said it was amazing because she got 17 of the best people she's ever seen. And her only sadness was she could only hire one of them. Right. And it cost her well less than $1,000 to do that. So that's the kind of innovation that we know we have to do, because we've been in the seat of the business person thinking, man, it's going to literally destroy my business if I have to spend this much to hire people. And I know I need valuable people who are culture fit. And so I think you need to have someone who's been in that seat, who has the constraints of time and money to be able to build a business like this.
The other piece of this that, full disclosure, like one of the things that I have been historically a little bit concerned about in the sort of parallel economy space that's emerging is people trying to wrap their arms around a problem that is too large. And I guess my cut on that in the case of what you're doing would be, trying to do a nationwide cross-sector job board. How are you thinking? Because it's, at any early stage in that process, it's a couple people here, a couple people there. Sure. Like how are you thinking through that problem right now in terms of, the early days of the organization? And I guess you guys are getting into not just the early days, but the later days too, getting around the problem of, there's 330 million people in this country. There's tens of millions of businesses. How do you get around this?
Yeah. I don't know that we've solved it yet. Great book, Cold Start. And I'm drawing a blank on the author, but Cold Start's a great book when you're thinking about a two-sided marketplace. Really talk through it. And they do tell you should be concentrating in different areas. We tried that with Dallas and actually got some concentration there. But it's kind of this weird moment because I do think there's a lot of people in this parallel economy that are riding on the fact that they are a conservative or Christian business and they don't have the best product. They're just riding on the fact that they're part of the parallel economy. Yeah. And I think
therefore you must buy my product.
Even though it costs more and it's a piece of crap. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so I want to avoid that temptation. We want to be the best at what we do. And honestly, this premium product where we actually go and help companies hire is partly my answer. Right. Mm-hmm. Because if I am posting jobs like Answers in Genesis got a ton of applicants right away, and they're in Kentucky because people want to work for a company like Answers in Genesis. Sure. And a lot of other businesses have succeeded, where I also have some small welding shops in the Midwest that, they didn't get anybody to even look at their job because it wasn't that interesting to them. Yeah. So that is a real problem because getting to scale is hard. And so that's where we did this pivot and said, okay, so if a business comes to us and says, we are trying to hire this position in this location, then we can manually take on the work of actually going out and finding people, having real conversations with real people. Mm-hmm. Would you be willing to move here? Are you interested? Because, it used to be people would move for a job. Now everyone assumes that they can work from home. Most of the Red Balloon companies, they like in person because they don't want the cultural momentum that's created from not working.
I'm still waiting for someone to create an ETF of only in-office working companies.
That's right.
I will put my entire savings into that
for sure. Right. And so that was the way that we, but that was like, that took some okay, so how do we solve this problem? Because either we're just going to focus on an industry or a location. And lots of people wanted us to go into LinkedIn and be a LinkedIn competitor or a Fiverr competitor. I've had people all over Europe ask, when's Red Balloon going to come to Europe, Australia, New Zealand? And the answer is not anytime soon, because you've got to focus as a business. And in fact, Public Square, early on, Public Square they were a marketplace that had a job board. And I was a job board that also had a marketplace. And so Michael and I sat down and said, hey, how do we actually work together? Instead of trying to boil the ocean, conservatives are traditionally bad at actually working together. What if we tried? And so he got rid of his job board and I got rid of my marketplace, and we send businesses. And if a business who just hired through Red Balloon is like, hey, now I want to advertise these people, I'm like, that's great. We're not the right platform. You should go over to Public Square. And Public Square is like, oh, hey, if you're hiring, you should go over to Red Balloon. Well, that's actually just been a big blessing for both organizations, but something conservatives are really bad at, right? We're kind of like, hey, you're 5% different than me, then I can never work with you. And I think the liberals have been better at coordinating, working together. I mean, you think about, I got a lot of friends that were at Parler when they got canceled. And you think about Apple, Google, and Amazon all work together to shut down Parler. Like, those are three arch rival businesses. You like Apple and Google and Android, like those are like, behemoth arch rivals. And yet they put aside their differences for a minute to nuke Parler, right? And so I think conservatives should probably do a better job of figuring out how to work together. And I think that's how you start to solve some of this scale problem. Because you're right, it is a scale problem. It is a two-sided marketplace. And it is a challenge.
Another potentially uncomfortable question. One of the things especially if we don't get another pandemic level shutdown or series of vax mandates and stuff, squeaky wheels coming out of existing companies and jobs might be doing so for values reasons. They also sometimes are doing so because they got fired and
because they're a
their
loser.
job. Yeah. How do you think through that problem? Is it the people drawn to Red Balloon can have a very, very good in scope reason for being drawn to Red Balloon, but they can also be, and you see this sometimes, like the same 4 people that are on everyone's job board because they suck and no one wants to hire them, and there's a reason for it. How do you think through that problem?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm more of a libertarian, so I'm like, look, let the market work those things out. If someone's a bad person, they're gonna rise to the surface as a bad person pretty quickly. But the reality is that for customers who are looking for hardworking conservatives for businesses, you're going to get a way higher proportion on Red Balloon. So one of our businesses, a restaurant, they said when they post a job on Indeed, 1 in 10 candidates show up for the interview. Not the job, the interview, because they're just collecting their unemployment checks, and you have to show that you're actually applying for jobs. And so they schedule interviews right on top of each other, knowing that generally people are just not going to show up for those things. David Bonson is the Bonson Group. They posted a job on Red Balloon and on ZipRecruiter, and they said they got 100 applicants on ZipRecruiter and 3 were worth talking to. And they posted the same job on Red Balloon and got 3 applicants, and all 3 were rock stars. So while I can't control the quality of the people, it is interesting. When we get people coming over from LinkedIn to Red Balloon, we have a special landing page for them that has the pledge that they have to read slowly and has a big American flag in the background. And when we added the American flag in the background, we had a bounce rate. It was 80% of the people would sign the pledge. Yeah, it's great. Whatever. I want a job. Then we did this big American flag in the background. It went down to 40% actually went through. So it was an amazing filter to put an American flag in the background, right? And so just things like that, you're going to know that you're probably going to have a values-aligned job seeker. Are they still a loser? Sure, because there's losers that are conservatives and liberals.
So one of the things that I'm pretty skeptical about as it relates to the kind of conservative ecosystem of businesses, you were talking about this, that it's frequently more expensive and a lot of the stuff is crap.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think about, the conservative business world is we don't do a very good job at innovation, like making new things, inventing new things. It's kind of an art that we've lost.
We say we need the conservative alternative to X.
Yeah,
correct.
It's always like, we just need this, but for the right.
Yeah.
How do you think about that, especially like building a tech company in an industry, where there are not a lot of conservatives?
Yeah. I won't say it's easy, right? We don't do research and development very well as conservatives. We're just kind of, yes, you're right. We're borrowing like, oh, I want a conservative, fill in the blank. And I don't think that's the right way to think it. Sometimes you got to catch up, right? Do we need servers that are not going to cancel us? Yes, we do. Is that exactly what Amazon Web Services is doing? Yes, but we just need someone who's not going to cancel.
Totally.
us. That's great. Right?
Basic infrastructure.
Basic infrastructure. That's and a job board honestly is basic infrastructure. Mm-hmm. I think that some of the innovation is going to come around. Most of tech that's in the job seeker space, anybody who's working on connecting, they're leaning hard into AI right now. They're saying, we're going to do an AI match. We're going to read your resume with AI. We're going to suggest jobs with AI and all those things. And I think hiring is actually a distinctly human thing to do. And so this is going to sound funny, but the innovation is we're trying to involve humans in the process as much as possible. And we're actually doing that interview for the business. And we're actually, if we see a business that's not getting applicants on Red Balloon, I have a lot of young, intelligent college students who are going out and finding them people and saying, hey, there's this job at a conservative business. And they'll go on LinkedIn or other places and say, would you be interested in applying to this? And it's amazing when these businesses who are paying $75 a month and they have an NSA student say, hey, I just reached out to so-and-so on your behalf and they're interested in applying to your job. Here's their email address if you guys want to connect. And the business is like, what is this? Right? And so customer service can be an innovation.
Yeah.
Right? Having a human involved in that hiring process can be an innovation. Is it the ultimate innovation? I have no idea. But right now, it is delighting our businesses. And then this process where instead of paying $60,000 to a recruiter, you're paying $4,500 to Red Balloon to do this whole process where we take over the hiring process for you. Like that is a scale and infrastructure innovation. Right? We just said, hey, we're going to cut the cost of this down, in some cases down to 5% of what it was before. And we're going to take on this hiring process for you. And it is amazing. These businesses are like, you literally saved my business because I didn't know how to hire. And instead of paying $40,000 or $60,000 for to get a recruiter that I don't know if I can trust them, Red Balloon's just going to take it over for me. And it's only $4,500 and the process is taken care of and it's very human and I get market feedback. It's amazing, right? And I am, as a business person, figuring out how do I build that in such a way that it's profitable and still a blessing to those customers. So innovation comes in a lot of different ways. That's how we're trying to innovate right now. I'm not saying that we're at the end of the road. We need to be innovating all the time.
Yeah. So because what you're doing is sort of basic infrastructure, you have a bird's eye view into this broader project of a parallel economy, of a conservative parallel economy. What are some of the big bottlenecks that you think are going to emerge? What are some of the hard problems that still need to be solved? Sort of Monday morning quarterback the progress that's been made so far and what still needs to be done.
Yeah. The parallel economy. I mean, honestly, some of the big players right now, I'll pick on a Public Square, they still have a long way to go to replace Amazon. But at the same time, Amazon took a long time to get where they are right now. So I'm not saying that, Public Square in less than 2 years should have caught up with those organizations. There's communication. I'd say communication is probably our biggest bottleneck if we were worried about cancel culture or anything like that. You think all of us have a Google or an Apple phone and all of us are on those networks. Even if you use Signal or other things, the reality is that AT&T, Verizon, the big cell phone companies own the infrastructure, and Apple and Google make your phone in China. I would say that is probably, and I don't see a solution to that anytime soon. Those are really, really big problems, right? So if we are worried about cancel culture, if we're worried about losing freedom, that is a huge bottleneck that many of us would really struggle without a smartphone these days, right? So I would say that's a big one. But we are making headway. So Public Square and Red Balloon did we surveyed 50,000 businesses in this freedom economy. We call it the Freedom Economy Index. And we've now done 2 monthly surveys of these people, asking them all kinds of things about what they think of politics, of politicians, of the economy, of their business, of infrastructure, all of these things. And the results have been really fascinating. And I think this should be encouraging to a lot of people. The red freedom economy is thriving. Most of the businesses said they're very worried about the economy, but they are growing and hiring themselves. And so I think what's happening is you're getting this weird tale of two economies that are happening right now, and this bifurcation. You see this with red states and blue states, right? Where the red states are thriving because they have less taxes and regulation, and blue states are dying and going into major budget deficits. Well, this is happening at a business level as well. So a lot of these small businesses are thriving, they're growing, they're successful. I talked to an HVAC company. He's like, I'm literally booked for 2 years right now because I have so much work to do. And so businesses that say do what they say they're going to do, when they say they're going to do it, at the price they say they're going to do it, which is kind of describes a conservative generally, not always, they're going to thrive and do very well, even though the economy is struggling. And so we have 80% of our businesses saying, I think we're going to go into a recession, but I'm going to continue to hire because my business is doing well. Well, that's an interesting moment, right? If that's happening and the economy is kind of shaky, and yet these businesses are just growing and thriving, well, give it a minute and they're going to catch up. And all of a sudden the parallel economy is going to be the economy, right? Yeah. And that's what I hope for.
So I'm curious about, this question might be a little out of scope, but how you think about, the difference between blue and white collar work. Like you brought up the HVAC company. Like I was trying to get some chimney work done a couple months ago, and it's a year-long wait. We have a huge lack of experienced and trustworthy blue collar people to do these kinds of jobs, in our homes, our communities, businesses. How do you think about solving that problem? Because as you said earlier, a lot of people are kind of laser focused on wanting to have this remote job where they can just be at home, all day, work like 4 hours and then be done, check out. On a macro level, how do you generally, not necessarily Red Balloon, but generally, how do you think you solve that problem?
It's a cultural shift. Right. If I'm a construction company, I need to be doing a lot of employment branding right now and telling people what a great career it can be. Because what happened is you had the baby boomers were the most wealthy generation the world has ever seen, because they were the first generation that consistently both parents went to work and worked. Right. And so they generated unprecedented amounts of wealth. And now they have kids who are lazy people. Right. And we have the real pandemic is the opioids happening, or there's so many young men who are addicted to video games that they don't actually go out and work. It's disgusting, right? And it's actually bad for your soul I think the 4-hour work week and all the striving for as little work as possible is just really bad for your soul. God made us to work. And if you look at, Nissim Taleb has an interesting, he went a little bit COVID crazy, but he has some interesting stuff in his books and talks about that, you'd think the safest place for you to be would be in your bed or on your couch. But if you spend all your time there, your blood will pool and you'll die, because bodies need friction. They need hard things. And that's how we live and survive. Well, it's true of your brain as well. You need to strive and do hard things, and construction is good for your soul. But we have to have a cultural shift, because these baby boomers who made all this money, worked really hard, they want their kids to be doctors and lawyers and politicians. And we need people who are HVAC workers and plumbers and chimney masons, right? And that's going to have to be a culture shift. Now, at the same time, those of us who have kids, which I do, I have 5 of them, I see this as a huge opportunity, because if I have hardworking kids who are going to go and actually not be afraid of work, they're going to be completely differentiated from most of the kids coming out of the public school system today. And so they're going to succeed and do very, very well. But we have to have a cultural shift to get back to those blue collar jobs, or we need to figure out how to do immigration the right way. Which is not what's happening right now.
Yeah. And how do you think about higher education as a part of this? We were talking about before the show, that you didn't go to university. How much of, I'm assuming it's a lot, but how much of our higher education system is the problem?
Yeah, it's a huge part of the problem, right? I don't know what it is this year, but for a long time, the top degree generated in America every year was psychology. Undergrad in psychology. It was the highest unemployed degree, and it was the top degree because people are like, I feel like if I know myself, everything will work out. And that's not true.
There's a classic tweet, which is, just to be clear, therapy is when you talk to a liberal until you agree with them.
Right, for sure.
And so what's the discipline of psychology then is,
right.
The process of how to do that and do that well.
Right, exactly. And it's an
propaganda.
undergrad in psychology is completely useless. You can't do anything with that, right? Except work at Starbucks. And so I think universities have done a huge disservice to the American people, because those people who are like, I don't know what I want to do, well, they just go into psychology rather than, well, have you thought about welding? Have you thought about some of these, so when I was at Emsi, this is a clear example. So I'm in an Uber, and my Uber driver, I said, so what are you doing with your life? He's like, well, I'm going to Seattle Central Community College to get an AA degree, and then I'm going to go to UW and get a psychology degree. And I said, why are you going to do that? He says, well, I feel like if I know myself, people will employ me. I'm like, okay. And it's just kind of this moment like, okay, do I destroy his dreams? And the answer was yes. And so I said, well, do you know that's the highest unemployed degree in America right now? And you're going to load up yourself with a ton of debt for the rest of your life, and you're not going to earn more money because you got that stupid psychology degree. And he's like, what? So I pull out my phone, and this is what I'm like, I'm going to take you through an assessment right now. It's going to take you 2 minutes. And so we go through this assessment. He's like, oh, I didn't know graphic design was a career, right? And you realize the level of ignorance by the young people in our country today. He didn't know that graphic design was a career. And he's like, I love doing graphic design. I'm like, and further, and this is, back to what Emsi was trying to do, you can see they have a program at the community college you're already at for graphic design. And it looks like here are 28 employers that are hiring in your backyard that are paying $50,000 a year for someone with only a graphic design certificate. So he's like, you realize you just saved me 2 years of my life and $200,000 of debt because I just had access to that information. But the problem is most Americans don't have access to that information. They think, these construction jobs, blue collar jobs are terrible. And so I'm going to go get my psychology degree. And so, And the problem is I was also deep in the heart of these universities. And so I saw their business model, and they needed psychology grads to come in and then to drop out in 2 years, right? Mm-hmm. This is the dirty little secret of the university system. They have to have dropouts because the margin on freshmen and sophomores is way higher than it is on juniors.
Large class sizes.
Large class sizes with a TA lecturing. Whereas when you get to a senior, you've got a professor actually working with, a small group of students. And so they need to load up a student with debt on a psychology degree and then have them drop out 2 years later because they can't cut it. That's the only way that their business model works. And the demographics are about to nuke universities in America, which will be exciting.
It's a little granular, but a couple of years ago, Google released, I believe, 4 pilot certificate programs. Mm-hmm. Did you see that at the time? Is there any kind of retrospective on how that has played out? I think it was like one was like UI design, one was like database related. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, it's honestly a lot of businesses, even businesses on Red Balloon, would rather hire someone has a master's degree in the School of Hard Knocks than a bachelor's degree from some liberal university. Because increasingly the education is not useful, A, and then B, they have earnings expectations associated with the massive amount of debt that they've just accumulated, right? Whereas you get someone who is not loaded down with debt, who's been taught to be a free thinker, has shown that they actually can work. Businesses are willing to train them. Businesses are willing to put them through coding boot camps or, give them on-the-job training if they're a hardworking person with a good attitude. So I think that is going to be the trend. That combined with the fact that low birth rates and abortion in America, we are about to hit a demographic moment where a lot of universities are simply going to go out of business because there aren't enough high schoolers coming through the system to make their existence worthwhile.
We're in that. I mean, there's massive class contraction going on, especially at the lower third of universities. As sort of a final question, you mentioned this sort of smattering of different businesses as sort of case studies of examples where Red Balloon's been really useful. If you had to pick a white whale in terms of a an industry or a sector of the economy where you think there's a potential for sort of hockey stick takeover from the mentality that organizations like yours and Public Square are bringing to the table, where is that? Like, where, if you could train fire to like shoot for the moon and have the whole thing, is there a potential? And maybe it's a couple places.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because I think that we have two economies in the U.S. and increasingly we're going to have a red economy and a blue economy where, liberals en masse, there was a survey that basically said they are more willing to spend with alignment of their values than conservatives are, right? And we saw what happened to Anheuser-Busch and Target. And there's some people that are concerned that what happened to Anheuser-Busch was actually done on purpose, that they wanted this great American brand that was, apple pie, baseball, Budweiser, right? They wanted to destroy something that, Americans identified with. That's a side note, given that the CEO worked at the CIA. Makes you wonder. Anyway, that's a side note.
Makes you think.
I know. I used to not be a conspiracy theorist, and then 2020 came around, and I think it's, anyway. And who knows? But I don't know. I think that you're going to just have this parallel economy continue to bubble up, and somebody, based on not what industry they're in, but based on their level of execution and business acumen, is going to succeed at a hockey stick level. I don't think, by the grace of God, I plan on building Red Balloon to $1 billion business, because the labor problem's not going away. Wokeness in the workplace is not going away. And so I fully intend to be the place where people who want to be free at work know where to go. And I'm starting to talk to some publicly traded companies who are saying, look, I got to figure out if I can deal with the backlash from my board, but I want to hire the people that are on Red Balloon. I don't want to hire the people who are on Indeed. And these are CEO level of publicly traded companies saying, I see what's going on. And I know that if I build cultural momentum with just hardworking conservatives, my business will succeed. And if I build cultural momentum with people coming off Indeed or ZipRecruiter who are, anarchists and hate capitalism, my business is not going to succeed. And so I'm obviously betting on the labor side because I think conservatives know how to work. But I don't know. I think it's going to be more based on who's running it than what industry it's in.
Andrew, this has been a fascinating discussion. Where can people keep up with everything that you're doing and saying, writing, and more importantly, how can they sign up for Red Balloon?
Yeah. So redballoon.work. It's not .com. Redballoon.work. You can go there. We have a ton of resources for job seekers. Everything's free for job seekers. We have an employee bill of rights. So if you feel like you're stuck at a woke corporation and you want to know what you can stand up for, what your rights are, that is a legally vetted document by Laura, the labor lawyer. Employee bill of rights. Encourage you to download it, read it, memorize it. And then obviously if you're a business and you want to hire, you want to be in a position where either you're just posting your jobs and having them in front of the best job seekers in the world, or if you want us to take over that hiring process, we'd love to have that conversation. And then we're on all of the social media platforms, both the woke ones and the non-woke ones. So at Redballoon.work. And you can follow me on Twitter, but I'm bad at social media. I'll just tell you right now, it's always been it's confusing thing to me, but yeah, we're on there as well. So, we'd love to have businesses, job seekers join the movement. You'll have no idea how much better your life will be when you hire people who don't hate you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for everything that you do. And thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Hopefully you enjoyed that discussion a little bit off the beaten path. Andrew is, I think, one of the only people I trust to build these businesses in the parallel economy. Again, DC and the rest of the country are full of these grifters that are from politics who are leading you to believe that they're going to somehow build titanic businesses. Andrew actually has done it, and he can do it again. Redballoon.work is just absolutely fantastic. And give them feedback, participate in it. We have those of you who are out in the country who are not going to necessarily participate in politics immediately. Send us feedback that you get having used the product. We think it's extremely important that it do well. And Andrew's a humble, God-fearing man who's open to criticism. And so it was a fascinating discussion. I could spend another 3 hours talking to him about the business side of things. You know, I had planned on asking him deep questions about venture capital, private equity, M&A, and everything, and then Nick cut me off because we would have gone for 3 hours. So just a fantastic discussion. Thank you guys as always for listening. We love doing this show. We've done over 120 episodes now, and it's only possible because you guys continue to listen to it. Be sure to rate and review the podcast. Thank you again. Thank you to Magic Mind for supporting the show, and we will see you guys next week. Moment of Truth is an American Moment Studios production filmed at the Conservative Partnership Center. Our podcast is produced and edited by Jake Mercier and Jared Cummings. Our intro music is A Minor Struggle by Ryan Serenich. Don't forget to like and subscribe on all platforms, and you can go to AmericanMoment.org to learn more.